Hi, everybody, and welcome to New Approaches to Newsletters. I'm Michael Hughes, a communication specialist with Notre Research. Primarily, I'm a graphic designer on our team, and I handle the email outreach. And I'm joined by Natalie Davis-Miller, managing editor of NDWorks, and we're here to talk about new approaches that we have taken since we pivoted our newsletters during the pandemic. So to set a baseline for NDR, every week we produce a community newsletter intended for our departmental audience of about 290 staff and affiliated faculty. We have more than 30 units in core facilities, and the newsletter was born out of a need to eliminate some of those individual emails that our units and facilities, leadership committees were all producing on a monthly basis. And because of that, we've tried to combine all those messages into a single email where we can engage and include as many of the events, opportunities, and announcements as possible. It's also a great place for us to share our past research stories that might have been missed in a short digestible format so that they can be revisited over time. And thirdly, one of the major goals of our newsletter was to help build a strong culture and community within Notre Dame Research so that we can attract other people to want to be a part of it. As our vice president explained, NDR should be a great place to work. So pre-pandemic, the newsletter was monthly. It was sent out the first week or the first day, usually on a Tuesday, if we could, and included 8 to 12 different elements each time that were put out into rigid buckets. And the buckets were intentional because we were trying to give our units and committees areas of the newsletter that they were able to help us fill. But because of the monthly cadence, the newsletter would get really long. And it was also kind of tough at times for teams to be able to plan out far enough ahead of time to get us the information that they needed to share. So each month we would include things like new employee, headshots and bios, service milestones and awards, congratulations messages for promotions, people having new children, getting married, things like that. We would feature the most recent news stories, any upcoming events, and then committee announcements or calls for action. Once the pandemic hit, I myself had only been with Notre Dame Research for about 6 weeks. So we knew that we needed to pivot in order to keep people motivated and informed. As we planned to make the shift, there were 5 questions that we wanted to answer. The first was, how do we make sure that we can get the information out effectively and quickly enough for them to keep their cores, labs, and studios open amid all the changes and working from home and things like that. We also needed to consider what content really mattered most to the audience, given the stress and the timeliness that it needed to have, and how we were going to reach them and keep them engaged for an undetermined amount of time. We weren't quite sure, how long we were going to be working from home or shut down. So we also needed to consider how to provide for the whole person, provide them a break at times, and give them something to look forward to each week. We needed to include everyone, regardless of role or experience. That included finding new things or new roles that administrative assistants could help with, organizing the testing sites on campus when we got to that point. And then 5th was, how do we not just maintain, but strengthen the community and connection between our staff and faculty, now that some were going to be on campus part of the time, home part of the time, some were going to be strictly from home, and others were just kind of waiting. The researchers specifically needed to get their labs open so that they could keep their work going. So ultimately, we knew that answers to those 5 questions would lead us to decide whether or not we were able to maintain the focus and keep our audience engaged. So we moved to a weekly cadence. The newsletter, I think we're up to 62 weeks in a row, has gone out on Wednesday morning. And we have shifted the time from 8 to 9. I'll get into that a little bit later. But because we were sending the newsletter more frequently, we also could shorten it, and the content became more flexible week to week. We prioritize university guidance, of course, but we also shared available resources and support systems and kept trying to promote a positive work culture. So we provided resources and acknowledged the responsibilities like children at home, caring for loved ones, and working remotely being new for so many of our staff and faculty. We we tried to send out videos of how they could set up their Zooms, how they could best organize their home offices, things like that. And then finally, we wanted to emphasize the importance of each role and share the talents that they may have that might not be tied to their job description. And we wanted to create a unique rallying point for our department, something to set this new newsletter apart, kind of to engage and re-engage and form a new habit around the newsletter. So we created Dome to Den, which the first Dome to Den was sent on April 1st, 2020. The first section was always dedicated to providing updates so that everyone who was now displaced could find resources and information they needed. We would link them directly to our website so that all faculty and staff could find the forms to keep labs and studios running, ask questions as they arose, and then updated that as we moved through the phases of reopening. Now we're fully open, ready for the fall, so that's great. As we move through the phase reopening, we also started highlighting resources outside of NDR, as in this example, we have the LGBTQ ally employee resource group that HR has sponsored. When the pandemic first started, the first area was always an update from our vice president for research, and usually ended with something motivational to try to keep everyone moving forward, ending with stay safe, stay healthy, and stay connected. Inclusive Intentions has been part of our diversity and inclusion efforts. It's a monthly feature where we ask for submissions from our staff to share things that they have found enlightening or have challenged them to think, especially this last challenging year. We're trying to be more understanding and change perspectives that we might have that we need to adjust. So we share a book or some other form of media, Netflix specials, things like that, broadly for anyone who would like to be able to learn from those things that they're able to reference. We did maintain a few elements from the monthly newsletter. Here we featured my teammate Alex, who recently finished her master's degree. And since we had a lot of success with engaging people through surveys, some didn't want to answer multiple questions or submit their photos. Any kind of real time crunch, they weren't so interested in. So we started doing a one-word survey at the end of each month where we ask a fun question like, what will you do to relax or have fun this summer? And then we limit the answers to the form to one word. And then I compile those and create a word cloud where the responses and repeated answers are larger. People have really responded to how simple this is. And I think the finished cloud graphic provides a nice breakup between the photos and text of our newsletter. Unfortunately, one thing that we lost initially were events until everyone learned how to present them via Zoom. But we'd like to promote things to do in South Bend and neighboring communities as part of our culture push. So typically we include things that happen at the county parks for families with children or are arts and music related. During the academic year, this space is dominated by our units and faculty seminars rather than community events. Specifically, we use county parks a lot because the university has a partnership with them. They actually house the Notre Dame linked experimental ecosystem facility, or for those who prefer acronyms, NDLEAF at St. Patrick County Park. We actually have some bald eagles that come back to nest every spring, so we do a big campaign around the hatch of the eaglets, and then they'll migrate back out in late August, early September, and we're going to replace our malfunctioning eagle cam that can be found on the Environmental Change Initiative's website. The most clicked feature that we have every week is our Do You Know section. We feature one employee each week and try to get a photo that was taken with family or while enjoying one of their hobbies rather than their professional headshots. I set up a survey of about 20 questions to allow the staff to answer as much or as little as they felt comfortable. And then we set up a landing page that we link to each week. This has really helped bring on new employees, the few that we've had during the pandemic, as well as reintroduce other staff members that have been around for a long time, but the newer people don't know. I don't have an example to share, but we also did an intrinsic motivation training series before and after Christmas break around the shifted academic calendar this year, where we shared videos and had response group forums to help people reset and find what was driving them as we finally reached the end of the fall semester and geared up for the spring. So what was successful? After 16 months of the new normal for our newsletter, we really found that the staff reacted and engaged well with responsive and timely pandemic guidance, the staff survey and individual features, sharing opportunities and events throughout the local community, our diversity and inclusion recommendations, and the intrinsic motivation series. There are a few periods where we did see some drops in leadership, but overall our numbers have been, they've just gone off the charts. Those times where there were dips, it was usually around a big internal deadline, a midterm, week, or finals being given. There was one 4-week stretch where our open rate dipped to about 30%, and where it was normally 60, 65. We were a bit worried that we were seeing that quick uptick like we had for the finals and midterm weeks. But after a deeper review, I found that still 85% of our audience had opened at least one of those 4 newsletters. So that was important for us because it meant that we weren't losing people due to any other major reason other than busier calendars. So after that stretch, we did adjust our send time on Wednesday mornings from 8 to 9 a.m. And that has appeared to help keep our message afloat a bit within inboxes and not get buried by the influx of early morning emails as much. I also implemented 2 surveys, one in October and one in March, to ask specifically what people were enjoying about the newsletter, what we could change or adjust. And the survey backed up these numbers and maybe more importantly highlighted that what we believed to be most important was right, and the changes that we made were helpful for people. So the monthly newsletter was getting about 80 opens out of 290-ish people a month. When we moved to weekly, now we're averaging almost 180 on a weekly basis. Our open rate for the monthly was 27, just under 28%. We're now over 60% on average. Our unique clicks went from 45 to 65. Our click rate, of course, dropped. It went down about 12%. But when you're increasing your opens, but more than doubling your opens, that's sort of bound to happen. We're still getting more clicks than we've ever had before. And then our total clicks, we were getting 76.5 for the monthly. Now we're getting over 110 a week. So in the end, we learned that brevity is always appreciated. People really like it, that they're able to easily scan the newsletter and find what they need. We'll definitely keep the weekly cadence moving forward because I think the length and the timeliness of our content has been the biggest reason that we've been able to maintain those amazing numbers for such a long span of time. We've also noticed and not noticed, but come to know that there's a genuine interest to learn from one another and about one another. We always speak, I'm sure other places do, about Notre Dame is special, and usually the first reason people give is that the people that work here. Our faculty and staff continue to show an interest in one another across disciplines and roles. The pandemic only enhanced that, and we'll continue to use that as a pillar of the newsletter. And then finally, the newsletter numbers, engagement numbers are important, but that should not be the sole measure of success. I'm very proud that the numbers are as high as they are, but it was the survey that actually allowed our readers to give us specific examples of what they enjoyed and what they liked about the newsletter that really put it all in perspective for me. Finally, I have this quote that I received in an email. I always learn something new going on in our units, and I love reading about different faculty and staff through the Do You Know highlights. The newsletters have been a great way to connect to remote work, highlighting major objectives like diversity and inclusion as an easy way to make Notre Dame research a great place to work. So thank you for following along. I know I sprinted through that, but I had a lot to cover. I'll answer your questions at the end if you have any. Right now, I'd like to introduce Natalie Davis Miller, Managing Editor of NDWorks and NDWorksWeekly.
Thank you, Michael. So NDWorks and NDWorksWeekly are print and digital newsletters for the campus community. The Office of Internal Communications at Notre Dame disseminates NDWorks print 4 times a year. And I should note that that is for this school year, coming down from previously 11 print issues and then down to 6 and now 4. And NDWorksWeekly, which is digital, 50 times a year. It comes out on Tuesday mornings at 8 o'clock. NDWorks has been a source of campus news and information for 17 years. The first 15 years is print only. NDWorksWeekly launched in July of 2019. Some of the features of NDWorksWeekly include we have an audience of nearly 10,000. That includes the faculty, the staff, postdocs, and retirees. We have 8 to 10 elements. We had started out with roughly 10 to 14 elements, and we learned to bring that down so that we wouldn't necessarily lose readers as they were trying to scan through everything. Articles are written and curated by the director, Gwen O'Brien, and myself, and by curated, we're going out to the university partners for other stories. And it includes regular features such as a conversation with, if you look to that image at the top, this is a conversation with Mike Brown. He was the first African-American mascot, a leprechaun at Notre Dame. And so it was a Q&A with him. We also do things like IMND. And you can see that example there with one of our research scientists. It recognizes the uniqueness and the individuality of Notre Dame employees. We also feature family connections where we will talk with siblings who work at the university. And then we also feature ND in the news. Whenever we have our researchers or other staff or instructors that might have something that's picked up by an outside news source, we like to highlight that as well. Additional features include content that reflects the university's identity. And you can go ahead and bring those all up, Michael. Research, academic excellence, global impact, faith, and service and community impact. And this, to your right, are some examples, our annual awards that definitely speaks to the academic excellence, as well as our researchers who have partnered with outside organizations. Additional features include content that reflects resources and tools that can be found on campus. Our Office of Information Technologies might send out something about spam or updates. Our human resources, if you look to the right there, you'll see benefits and compensation, and they can click through. It'll take them right to that article, either on our website or go to the HR website. We also work with our Wellness Center to talk about well-being. There's an article there about avoiding, how avoidance is a problem. There may be other things like stress, those types of articles. And we also do a number of sustainability and environmental articles. And we also include diversity and inclusion.
Sorry.
Okay. Thank you both very, very much. This is really good. This has really been great. I don't see a lot of questions. We still have a lot of people listed as attendees. I don't know how many of them are simply just leaving their lines open and having lunch. But you've seen all the questions in the chat function, right?
Not yet. And I'm still going through my presentation. Are we out of time?
No, we're not out of time. I apologize. You paused.
Oh, okay.
I thought you were still.
No, there was a delay.
Yeah, there is a delay. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I just wanted to keep things moving. So yeah, please keep going. I'm sorry. No, you have a half hour, so we're good.
Okay, good, because I'm a talker. Thanks, Greg.
That's by all means, whatever you need to do. Again, I'm going to go shut up.
Thank you. Okay, Michael, we can keep going.
All right.
Like Michael, I was fairly new to Notre Dame, and I was there about 7 months when the pandemic hit. So we had to pivot for the pandemic as well. So we suspended the print issues after March 2020. I jokingly say that the print issue arrived on campus and the ink was still wet. So within a week or so, we were all working remotely. We had concerns about how the virus would spread if we mailed it out. We didn't know. Everything was new to everyone. Also, people weren't working on campus. I mentioned earlier that we went down from 10 to 14 elements when we really pivoted to using the weekly as the main source of information to 8 to 10 elements, making it very lean and putting out the important information. We also supported the HERE campaign, and Michael can click to that. The HERE campaign was the university's response to the pandemic, including protocols, a website for additional information about testing, surveillance, et cetera. So we would often have these kind of what we call ads. There's no text underneath it. It's just basically an ad that would lead people to additional information. During that time, from roughly March of 2020 to June of 2021, we featured 120 original pandemic stories. Go ahead and click through those, Michael. We celebrated reassigned staff. For example, we had staff that maybe worked in the laundry, there wasn't such a need for it, or the restaurants, which were temporarily closed, and then those staff would be moved to maybe answering a COVID hotline. We showcased the response, the resiliency, and the recovery of the university during this time. We provided wellness advice, and then we included some human interest types of stories. I mentioned IMND before, and then we went ahead and included IMND, work from home pets, and you can see that there. I couldn't believe that was a real dog. It was so cute. So when we put that call out to people to send us their pets, we had a great response, which led us to realize that audience participation is very important. And when you click on some of the pictures, if you click on one of those, Michael, you'll see that it goes back to information or a little caption about the pet and the owner. Thank you. And we continued with our regular features. We also included late breaking information. With the newsletter going out on Tuesday mornings at 8 o'clock, if there was something important and we needed to hold it, we would hold it maybe an hour or two, or even until the next day, and no one ever complained about that. So here are some of the benefits of NDWorksWeekly doing the digital newsletter. It supplements the print. And if you could click on that. This is might be going. We can click off of that if it's running a little slow. It's okay. We'll keep going. We'll keep it moving. It reduces mass emails. Instead of HR and OIT and all the other different departments sending out emails, they could just reach out to us, give us the information, and we can include it in one email. Ads, as you see there to the right, provide quick hits of information. So here's one that talks about live well rewards, and the more activities you complete, the more you save. This is an HR thing. There's a place for them to click there, and it drives people back to that HR site. It supports sustainability efforts. We just haven't been using a lot of paper. And it's viewable on a number of screens, including the ND mobile app. Fosters audience engagement, as I showed you, with people sending in pictures of their pets. And it fosters partnerships with other departments on campus, and it provides us with a lot of sources of information. So here's what we found successful, and you can go ahead and put those up. The open rate increased nearly 10%. Before the pandemic, we were around 50% or above. And then when it went straight to NDWorksWeekly without the print, we were around 60 and as much as 70% with reader engagement with our open rate. The articles encourage reader participation, and you'll see over here to the right, we recently ran this one, recording the great comeback in photos, asking people just to take pictures as they return to work. And we're also going to have our photographers taking photos as well. Chronicle the response to the pandemic. This is historic. No one's ever been through this. And so when we look back, we'll have these stories, provided readers with tools and resources if they had questions about things they knew where to go. Became a source of breaking news, as I mentioned before, and it became a valuable resource overall. People began reaching out to us with comments and requests for stories. So what we learned, working with campus partners for stories is very important. Can we click on that one, Michael? So if you scroll down on this, let's see, this is the newsletter as you see it right here, VP host drive-in for Notre Dame research. Now this is Michael's department. It's my understanding that they just did this yearly drive-in activity yesterday. So Michael maybe can tell us about that later. But this was the type of thing that we saw on their website. Michael, can you click through on that? And so this takes it to his page where they talked about the website. So we're able to glean from other departments some of their activities. Thank you.
Do you want to talk about the print version?
This is just the print version. This is what wouldn't open up earlier. As Michael scrolls through, you see this outside image of the print version. This was a very strategic thing. We decided to make a version where the outside pages, the outside 8 pages were our regular features, and then the inside pages were all about safety, so that stop right here for a second. Right here, you could pull out this entire section where it says SF1, that was our safety edition, and you could hang on to it. So it's very strategic. The tactical part of it is when we move to the weekly, we can then either run some of these articles again in the weekly or add new articles, but all focusing toward this. So the weekly will support the print issue. Thank you. So these are additional things that we learned. Michael, go ahead and click through on these. Plan to edit stories. When you get stories from other sources, sometimes they may be academic writers, and there may be a list of sources as you would do in an academic paper, but it's a little different with journalism. So you might need to plan on editing the stories, editing them down. You may be working with people who are not writers, so maybe they can just give you a paragraph of information. Maybe you can send them a list of questions, things that would encourage them. Use photo galleries. Sometimes the photos will tell the story. For example, when we had a Notre Dame football game, the blue and gold game, basically faculty and staff could attend with their families. I went there and just took a few pictures of people and got their information, very short blurb about what happened and a lot of photos. People enjoy seeing themselves and seeing their coworkers in the photo galleries. Of course, we collect data. We use Emma. It's easy to collect data for trends and for reports and when we're out there entering those awards, that type of thing. The print and digital work together. You'll see that I have a QR code there, and if you've got your camera handy, you can point it there and you'll be able to pull up our latest NDWorksWeekly. When our print edition comes out, we will be using QR codes and pointing people to stories that they can find on our website. And when we have our digital issue at that same time, we'll direct people to look for the print issue either in their department or in stands around campus. Another thing that we learned is because we're mailing out to the entire campus, including faculty and staff and retirees and different groups, not the students, but the employees, spend time with your subject line. You want it to be succinct, but you want it to target the different audiences. Also remember that email is forever. So we have a number of eyes looking at this before it goes out, because once it's out there, it's hard to retract it. And the other thing is that stories will come. Working at a university the size of Notre Dame, there are a lot of departments, there are a lot of things that are going on, and oftentimes people will reach out to us, or we can just go to different departments and see what's happening with them. Connections make it easy and relationships make it work. In speaking with Gwen O'Brien, the director of internal communications, about stories, she said sometimes we are fishing and sometimes people throw fish into the boat. And I said, that's fantastic. I'm going to write that down. And it's true. We start out our week. We have a spreadsheet that's running several weeks. As we get stories, we know things are coming out. We populate that spreadsheet between 8 and 10 stories. Sometimes there are some blank spaces there, but always they fill up. We get people sending us stuff, and those are the times when people are throwing fish into our boat. Thank you so much for sharing your lunch hour with us, and we're going to go ahead and open it up to some questions.
Okay, you guys can do this yourself through the chat function, or you can have me do it. It's entirely your call. We do have quite a few questions. I had to jump out for a second, so I don't know if you did you answer the first one from Lynn McFarland, because she has a great listed. So did you actually answer? Can you compare your metrics from monthly to weekly? Did you already do that?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I can go back and go through that again if it's needed. The second question is the newsletter only going out to staff within the Division of Research? Yes, it goes out to just the staff and faculty that are affiliated with our units.
Okay.
Yeah. Says, how does NDR select people for the Do You Know feature? Self-submission, nominated by others. Anytime we've had a new hire, I reach out to them directly and have them do it as an introduction, now being off campus. So I'll reach out to them and have them introduce themselves kind of to the rest of the department. Other than that, we've also had a lot of people volunteer. There've been a few weeks where I've had to wrestle some arms and legs to get people to fill it out, but overall people are willing to share, and that's one of the great things about Notre Dame research.
How did you determine the new categories, features in your newsletters? Did you survey your readership? For our newsletter, we looked at our department, our division, and our strategic, what we were looking for, and we wanted to make sure we hit those buckets, so to speak. That's the best way for me to say that. And then we also provide just like resources and tools. But for example, if international was one of our things, looking at the strategic content, then we made sure we go out and get some international stories. Research is another bucket, so we go out and look for things like that. What about you, Michael?
We just kind of take the temperature of the room, and we kind of know with such a small audience compared to 10,000 that Natalie's dealing with. We kind of know what people are looking for. Specifically for the pandemic, the most important thing, of course, was the guidance from the university and the leadership. And then everything off of that is just kind of built around the culture and keeping people motivated and moving forward.
What do you include in Fort Print editions per academic year? So we're doing 2 the fall and 2 in the spring. And so the one we're working on right now, it has a feel of together again. And so we're going to have a letter from some leadership, just kind of talking about what campus has been like. We're introducing QR codes. We're introducing our wellness center team because they've been very active. The pandemic left a lot of people feeling maybe a little isolated, things like that. So they're kind of, as I said earlier, strategic, so kind of a theme with them. We could do a theme on diversity and inclusion in our spring issue, for example, and then go out and find stories like that. And then when we go to the digital issues, we can kind of support those stories as well as the other content. What platforms are you using to create and distribute your newsletters? We're using Emma. Michael, what are you using?
We're still using Emma. We have a few units that do their own thing and are not using Emma, but that's the official email platform of the university.
Okay, with the IMND feature, specifically the work from home page, where do you host the content? Is it available on an internal staff only site or a public site? So we featured in the newsletter. The newsletter links back to our NDWorks website, and there they can read the full article. So basically it lives on our website, and the website is basically public. Anybody can go there and see it.
Do either of these newsletters include student profiles, awards, et cetera, alumni? Are there separate pubs targeting students only? Ours do not. Our community newsletter does not. We have units that have their own newsletters that will highlight the students and awards and alumni for those particular areas.
We have another newsletter that goes out that's called The Week at ND. And so there's a faculty staff version that goes out. It often features events and maybe there are call for awards or things like that. And then there's a student version. And so the students are often very interested. Let's say there's research and it's paid research, or maybe there are food opportunities like a food truck on campus, things like that. Those things are very popular. So that goes for the students. There's also an alumni association, and so they also reach out to alumni. As far as NDWorks and NDWorksWeekly, if we have students that are maybe doing research with faculty and it's published or something like that, we'll feature them every once in a while. But we look for excellence. So if the student is doing something that's excellent, if they're maybe volunteering with the food drive or something like that, we like to show that as well because we want to show campus life, but it's primarily for the faculty and the staff.
The next one says, beyond engagement rates and surveys, how do you measure newsletter success? I think the biggest or the most telling thing for NDR has been people are talking about it. We have been sent emails and they're not shy about telling us when we mess up. So I know that if we were, they would let us know. That example I shared was just one of many that we've received that people have really connected and appreciate what we're doing week to week. How about you, Natalie?
Like you, people, they're not shy about letting you know. And honestly, if I get something, if we've made a mistake, if we need to make an apology in the newsletter, we have no problem doing that. But that is a sign of success to me because it says that people are reading it. They're reading through, they're clicking through, and they're reading the articles. And we also get questions. Sometimes they may want to know a little bit more about an article. And then there's just word of mouth. Our director, Gwen O'Brien, shared something from another department where they commented that they liked the way that NDWorks was going. I had a comment from someone on our campus as well. So a lot of times we get feedback that way, and I really appreciate that. Reference photo galleries. Would like to know more about how you are handling this technically. Are you including just a photo or two in the newsletter with a link through to a photo gallery or the website, or are you presenting photo galleries in the newsletter? We just put like one photo. So for example, with that work at home pet, the top photo that you saw, that was the hero image. And we basically put that in there. And we also use the graphics for I am ND. And then we said work at home pets. So we just feature that and then they can click through. Sometimes we use buttons in Emma, sometimes we just say more and they can click through and see the whole article on our website. Or if it's a photo gallery that goes somewhere else, it would link to that. But generally speaking, we keep it on our website.
Do you connect to external news agencies to broaden the outreach of your university newsletter?
Do you at all, Michael?
And so we have the community newsletter here, and then we also do a public newsletter, and we have an indie in the news section, and we pull a lot of that from what Natalie compiles and collects for us, and that will just feature our faculty and staff if they've been cited anywhere, like the Washington Post, CNN, things like that. Other than that, we try to use our newsletter specifically to drive traffic to the website.
We connect to external news when we have an ND in the news. So for example, if someone's quoted in the Washington Post or something like that, and I try to avoid those paywalls so they can actually go right to the story, then yes, we'll connect them to that. But we're not actually trying to necessarily broaden the outreach of the university newsletter outside. So for example, we don't, it's public, people can find it, but we're not sending it out to outside of the university.
And then Krista says she's an editor of a very similar internal communications newsletter at Georgia. And she's curious about the process for prioritizing stories and deciding what goes first, second, etc.
Well, that's a very good question. And sometimes we absolutely know what's very important. If there's a comment or something coming from the president's office, it's going to be a priority. We need to get it out there. Some things are a timely nature. We want to get it out there. I think it helps by having 8 to 10 sections or elements so that hopefully everyone can just scroll down fairly quickly and then decide what they want want to read. And also we look at our other channels. Maybe it's just not best for NDWorksWeekly. Maybe it's best to go with the other newsletter, The Week at ND, or maybe there's another channel for it to go out. Or sometimes we may have something that Gwen O'Brien, our director, will say, we're going to do a communication plan for this, and it's going to go out in 3 different ways. It'll go out as a newsletter. It'll go out in this. We have another thing called Inside ND, so employees can go to that, and there are little important messages. Maybe a street is closed for some reason on campus. So there are a number of other avenues we can take.
And then apologies if I missed this, does the NDWorks newsletter exist alongside a public-facing newsletter for the community of students or alumni?
So the NDWorks Weekly is the digital newsletter that comes out every week, except for a couple of weeks around in December between the holidays. And then the print newsletter will be on campus 4 times this year. And so we basically leave it there. We try to make sure we have articles that will have a shelf life that they can refer back to.
And I see some notes from Gwen. I think that's every question.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read what Gwen has said. There's a survey every other year about services provided by university services, which includes NDWorks. The users can rate services and offer comments. On a 10-point scale, faculty, staff give us about a 9 for both print and the weekly newsletter. They also offer comments and suggestions, which we read through. We also have an email address, ndworks@nd.edu, that people can use to offer suggestions for stories and other feedback. Thank you, Gwen.
Mm-hmm.
That looks like that's it for the questions.
Okay. So thank you so much for joining Natalie and I. If you want to write or have other questions that come up later, you can see our email addresses on the screen. If not, thanks for joining us.